Damn. Fisticuffs. Look at him. Look at him. Wow. Wow. Antifa be wildin'. What's up, world? It's your boy Species back on the check-in. A little bit of info, politics as usual. Today we're going with Antifa. Don't say that too loud. Don't say that too loud. Antifa. Let's get into it, gang. Antifa, and this is from Wikipedia. Antifa, United States. Antifa is an anti-fascist and left-wing political movement in the United States comprising an array of autonomous groups that aim to achieve their objectives through the use of both nonviolent and violent direct actions, rather through policy reform. A highly decentralized movement, Antifa political activists are anti-racist who engage in protest tactics seeking to combat fascists and racists such as neo-Nazis, white supremacy, and other right-wing extremists. Say that fast. Right-wing extremists. This may involve digital activism, harassment, physical violence, and property damage against those whom they identify as belonging to the far right. Individuals involved in the movement tend to hold anti-authoritarian and anti-capitalist, anti-fascist, and anti-state views, subscribing to the range of left-wing ideologies such as anarchism or anarchy, communism, Marxism, social democracy, and socialism. Both the name Antifa and the logo with two flags representing anarchism and communism are derived from the German Antifa movement. Antifa actions have received both criticism and praise. Conspiracy theories about Antifa, which tends to inaccurately portray Antifa as a single organization with leaders and secret sources of funding, have been spread by right-wing activists. Say that fast. Right-wing activists. Right-wing activists, media organizations, and politicians, including Trump administration officials and the 2020 Trump campaign. There have been multiple efforts to discredit Antifa groups via hoaxes on social media. Many of them false flag attacks originating from alt-right and 4chan users posing as Antifa backers on Twitter. Really? Far right? Really? Infiltrating? Really? Some hoaxes have been picked up and reported as facts by right-leaning media. During the George Floyd protests in May and June 2020, President Donald Trump and Attorney General William Barr blamed Antifa for orchestrating the mass protests. But analysts of federal arrest did not find links to Antifa. You lied. You lied. You lied on Antifa. Why did you lie on Antifa? That's my aunt, Antifa. There have been repeated calls from Trump, Barr, and others to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization, which Barr has characterized as highly organized. However, academics, legal experts, and scholars, among others, argue that Antifa cannot be designated, as it would be a violation of the First Amendment to the United States of the Constitution. Okay, let's do the etymology and the use. And this is Wikipedia. The English word Antifa is a loan word from the German Antifa, taken as a shortened form of the word anti-fascist, and its nickname of anti-fascist action, a short-lived group who inspired the wider Antifa movement in Germany. Label Antifa should be limited to those who proactively seek physical confrontation with their perceived fascist adversaries, and not be misapplied to include all anti-fascist counter-protesters. Ideology. Individuals involved in the Antifa movement tend to hold anti-authoritarian, anti-capitalist, anti-fascist, anti-state views, subscribing to a varied range of left-wing ideologies. A majority of adherents are anarchists, communists, and other socialists who describe themselves as revolutionaries. Although some social democrats and other leftists also adhere to the Antifa movement, Antifa involvement in violent actions against far-right opponents and the police has led some scholars and news media to characterize the movement as far left and militant. You can't have a left without a right. You can't have a right without a left. And yet, you guys choose sides. According to historian Mark Bray, an expert on the movement, the vast majority of anti-fascist organizing is non-violent, but their willingness to physically defend themselves and others from white supremacist violence and preemptively shut down fascist organizing efforts before they turn deadly, distinguishing them from liberal anti-racists. Described as a pan-left and non-hierarchical movement, Antifa is united by opposition to right-wing extremists and white supremacy, as well as opposition to centralized states. Antifa activists rejects both conservative and liberal anti-fascism. The Antifa movement generally eschews mainstream liberal democracy, having an illiberal disdain for the confines of mainstream politics, and favoring direct action over electoral politics. Who you put your faith in? Who you put your faith in to get it done? These crooked politicians? Do you? Time and time again, what we get? The same results. Same results. Same approach, expecting a different result, but you get the same results. Despite Antifa's opposition to the Democratic Party and liberalism, some right-wing commentators have accused their adherents of being aided by liberal sympathizers and affiliated with the Democratic Party, as well as being a single organization funded by liberal financiers like George Soros. masterminding violence at Black Lives Matter protests, and that anti-fascists are the real fascists. According to CNN, Antifa is a short for anti-fascist. The term is used to define a broad group of people with political beliefs lean towards the left, often the far left, but do not conform with the Democratic Party platform. Does not. The BBC notes that, as their name indicates, Antifa focuses more on fighting far-right ideology than encouraging pro-left policy. Why not encourage pro-left? Antifa. I'm talking to you, Antifa. Okay, now let's get into some brief activities Antifa was involved in. Apart from the other activities, Antifa activists engage in mutual aid, such as disaster response in the case of Hurricane Harvey. According to Natasha Leonard in The Nation, Antifa groups as of January 2017 were working with interfaith groups and churches to create a new sanctuary movement, continuing and expanding a 40-year-old practice of providing spaces for refugees and immigrants. Antifa activists also conduct research to monitor far-right activity, holds conferences and workshops on anti-fascist activism, distribute literature at book fairs and films, as well as advocating ways of fostering sustainable, peaceful communities, such as working with community gardens. Antifa activists often use the black box tactic, in which people dress in black and cover their faces in order to thought surveillance and create a sense of equality and solidarity among participants. Solidarity, equality, participants. Antifa activists wear masks to hide their identity from protesters on the other side, who might dox people they disagree with from police and cameras, and for philosophical reasons such as the beliefs that hierarchies are bad and that remaining anonymous helps keeps one ego in check. Joseph Bernstein from BuzzFeed News says the Antifa activist also wears masks because they fear retribution. From who? The far right. And who else? The cops, whom they believe are sympathetic, if not outright supportive to who? Fascists. Who? The far right and the cops. Now, law enforcement and officials. Let's go to something a little bit more modern. July 2020, FBI Director Christopher Wray, who stated in a press release June 2020 that anarchists like Antifa are exploiting this situation to pursue violent extremist agendas, testified to the State Judiciary Committee that the agency considers Antifa more of an ideology than an organization, which was reiterated September 17th, remarked that lawmakers, this contradicted President Trump's remarks about Antifa and put Wray at odds with the Trump administration. It's more of an ideology than an organization. According to the Associated Press, Wray did not dispute that Antifa activists were a serious concern, stating that Antifa was a real thing and that the FBI had undertaken any number of properly predicted investigations into what we would describe as violent anarchist extremists, included into individuals who identify with Antifa, whom the FBI identified as a movement or an ideology, rather than as a group or an organization. Rather than. Ray stated that racially motivated violent extremists such as who? White supremacists have been responsible for the most lethal white supremacists for the most lethal attacks in the U.S. in recent years. Although this year the most lethal violence has come from anti-government activists such as anarchists and militia types. Now, civil rights organizations. According to the Anti-Defamation League, known as the ADL, most established civil rights organizations criticize Antifa tactics as dangerous and counterproductive. The ADL criticized Antifa for its use of unacceptable tactics such as violence and warned that such tactics provide a powerful propaganda and recruitment tool to right-wing extremists. However, the ADL stated that it is important to reject attempts to claim equivalence. You heard that? The ADL said that. It is important to reject attempts to claim equivalence between Antifa and who? White supremacist groups they oppose. Noting that right-wing extremist movements are much more violent and have been responsible for hundreds of murders in the United States, while there have not been any known Antifa-related murders. That's a rewind. That's a rewind. Noting that right-wing extremist movements are much more violent and have been responsible for hundreds of murders in the United States, while there have not been any known Antifa-related murders. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, Antifa members have been involved in skirmish property crimes. But the threat of lethal violence pales in comparison to that posed by who? Far-right extremists. Okay. Now, there's a list of hoaxes. And I'm going to give you just one hoax related to Antifa. As wildfires raged on the West Coast in September 2020, rumors spread on social media that Antifa was deliberately setting fires. Deliberately. It's a hoax. And preparing to loot property that was being evacuated, which local police departments debunked. You heard that? Debunked. Some residents refused to evacuate based on the rumors, choosing to defend their homes from the alleged invasions. Authorities pleaded with residents to ignore the false rumors. A firefighters union in the Washington state, also debunking these rumors, described Facebook as an absolute cesspool for misinformation on the topic. Facebook, You have some explaining to do. Prominent promoters of the unfounded rumors included adherents of who? QAnon. Who? QAnon conspiracy theories. One false claim that 6 Antifa activists had been arrested for setting fires was specifically amplified by who? QAnon. Lies. The anonymous person or people behind QAnon had for months been organizing digital soldiers on social media and internet message boards to wage information war to influence the 2020 United States elections. Hoax. Tied to who? The Q. Lies. Coming from who? The Q. Trigger word. Antifa. Trigger word. Now, let's listen to Antifa in their own words. And this one is coming from CNN, and it's Inside Violent Anarchist Group, Antifa.
Protesting against the hateful bigots, the Nazis and Klansmen in Charlottesville, were peaceful, but not all of them. In their midst was a sometimes very violent group of protesters that call themselves Antifa, known to not only clash with bigots, but also sometimes with police and occasionally storefronts. At least 2 journalists in Virginia were assaulted by violent counter-protesters over the weekend, including this cameraman from the Richmond CBS affiliate. CNN's Sarah Ganim now takes us inside Antifa and shows us this group like you've never seen it before.
It's 6 a.m. in Portland, Oregon, and we're headed to a bar with blacked out windows.
They wanted to meet us really early in the morning because they're concerned about a lot of people being around.
We are meeting members of the Rose City Antifa, short for anti-fascist. This group's main goal is to disrupt neo-Nazis and white supremacists, but also take on government and capitalism.
Antifa...
Neo-Nazis, white supremacists, capitalists. Moving on.
Is any group that's willing to stand up against fascists by any means necessary.
By any means necessary, they say, can mean outing a white nationalist at their work or to their neighbors. Or, as we've seen recently, violence, fires, property damage.
So given those 3 things, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, capitalists, control, is it the violence? Is it the violence that you don't like?
Hand-to-hand combat at protests across the country.
Explain to me the reasoning behind fighting. You have to make it so unpalatable to be doing white supremacist organizing that they no longer want to do that. And historically, that's what's worked. You have to put your body in the way, and you have to make it speak in a language that they understand, and sometimes that is violence.
There's no firm number on how many Antifa activists there are in the U.S. because there isn't any.
And what I respect about it, I'm not saying I condone, but what I respect about it is it's every man, every hue man of every hue in Antifa. So it's not a specific group that you can't identify, or you can identify Antifa.
One organization. Most are local groups that recruit and communicate through social media. But experts who track these organizations say their membership is growing in response to the rise of white national groups and the election of President Donald Trump. Violence and property destruction led to more than 200 arrests in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. Prosecutors say they were wearing masks covered head to toe in black, a tactic the Antifa call Black Bloc.
People dress in Black Bloc for a few things. One,
Scott Crow has been leading anarchist and militant leftist groups for decades.
so people put on the masks so that we can all become anonymous. And then therefore we are able to move more freely and do what we need to do, whether it is illegal or not.
So some people will push back on that and say that the black bloc is to keep people from being identified and arrested when they break the law, when they commit crimes.
Damn right. It's a good way to avoid the ramifications of law enforcement.
Now, you know I'm not going to publicly say I condone that last part. Like, damn right. Like, just ruining people's livelihoods that have zero to do with your foolishness.
We saw that firsthand at a May Day protest in New York City.
We cover our face because the Nazis will try to find out who we are. And that is a very bad thing because they harass people. When they organize, they kill people, they hurt people, they fight people. And we're the ones who are fighting back. They are the second coming of Hitler.
Police in Berkeley told us they haven't seen this kind of destruction since the 1960s. Law enforcement in other cities are dealing with similar situations. Like in Portland, Oregon, where Antifa have been involved in at least 10 protests ending in violence, according to police. And it's wearing on the community.
It is new. It's like this rumble mentality of, I'm going to bring my friends, you bring your friends, and we're going to fight it out in the park. It's not something we've seen here. It's not good for the city. People are just frustrated by it. It's affecting their livability. It's affecting their business.
Has it become more violent?
It happens quicker. The fire starting that we saw on May Day is something we haven't really seen much of in the past. The running through the street, breaking windows and everything in sight. We haven't seen it as consistently as we've seen it in the last 8 months.
But it's the violence that's gotten them attention, directly confronting groups that preach white nationalist rhetoric, like on Inauguration Day, when white nationalist Richard Spencer was punched in the face. And it was the Antifa movement that caused Berkeley to cancel speeches by extreme right provocateurs like Milo Yiannopoulos.
If there are the more hardcore elements, the white supremacists and neo-Nazis that go to these rallies that are itching for a fight, we're there to say, we'll stand in your way.
Can I say it? Can I say it? White on white crime. That's what that looks like. White on white crime. On a bigger scale, anarchists taking down the government. On a bigger scale.
The thing is, Jake, that experts who I've talked to say that the Antifa violence may end up actually hurting their cause. Across the country, people who are dressing in black bloc are getting arrested. Authorities are taking this seriously, but that's not stopping them at all. They have been telling me that they believe that this tactic is working. But one of the interesting things that I found in doing this reporting, what's really surprised me, is that we found that a lot of these new Antifa members, they're young people, disenfranchised young people who felt that they were let down by both parties after the election, and this is where they ended up. Jake?
Lies. Lies. They're not all disenfranchised. No, they're not. How? How? Spiritually?
I suffered from
mentally? Financially? Physically? Or was it all? Was it all? Was it all? Antifa. Well, my thoughts. Antifa. I guess we all have a common enemy. Our approach might be different. But I guess in the end, everyone has a common enemy. If there's a left, then someone got to pick the right. What I don't understand is, how do you choose? How do you choose? Where do I fit in? What's in it for me? What's in it for my well-being? Am I supposed to pick the left only because you're right? Huh. That is a question. Anti-everything, anti-everything. Antifa. It's your boy on the check-in. Just brought to you. Antifa. We did QAnon. We did Antifa. Trigger words. America's trigger words. If you like what you see here, let me get a thumbs up. That way I know what type of content to bring to you. Hit the subscription button, because you never know what you might get around here. You never know what you get around here. It's your boy.